Have you ever noticed that the moment things start going right, something inside you wakes up and breaks it? The moment success gets close, the moment someone actually sees you, the moment you're about to claim something that belongs to you, something shifts, and suddenly you're sabotaging, quietly, deliberately, like you're the architect of your own collapse. You've done this before, many times, so many times that you've stopped counting, and every time it happens, you feel that sickening recognition. You know you did it. Some part of you made sure failure happened, but you can't explain why. You can't even fully admit it's happening while it's happening. You just watch yourself do it, like you're a passenger in your own life. Have you ever wondered what kind of force inside you is strong enough to consistently destroy the very things you say you want? What kind of power has to exist within you to override your conscious desires, your plans, your efforts? Because that's not a glitch, that's not weakness, that's not bad luck repeating, that's infrastructure. That's an entire system designed and maintained specifically to keep you from getting what you actually want. And the most terrifying part? It's not trying to hurt you, it's trying to save you. This is the mechanism behind self-sabotage. This is what nobody talks about because it requires us to face something unbearable, that we are not victims of our own destruction. We are the architects, we are the engineers, and the force doing the sabotaging isn't an enemy. It's a protector that's been working overtime for decades. This is not a motivational talk, this is an excavation. And if you're ready to see what's really happening beneath the surface of your self-destruction, then stay. Because by the end of this, you'll understand the mechanism, and once you understand it, you can't unsee it. Your ego isn't born out of arrogance. That's the lie we've been sold. Your ego is born out of vulnerability. It emerges in childhood as a protector, a guardian, a voice that says, if you can't be loved for who you are, then we'll construct someone who can be, someone stronger, someone who never gets hurt, someone who's always in control. This is what Alfred Adler, the depth psychologist, understood so clearly. He saw that many of our personality structures aren't natural, they're compensations. They're creative solutions to feeling inferior, to feeling powerless, to feeling unseen. The child who learns early that showing emotion means punishment doesn't grow into an emotionless adult by accident. He constructs an armor, and he becomes so good at it, so practiced, that by the time he's an adult, he forgets there's anything beneath the armor at all. Your ego did the same thing. It looked at the world, and it learned the rules. Don't be too needy, don't show weakness, don't dream too big. It hurts less when you fail small. And somewhere in your teenage years, or maybe earlier, it made a deal with you. A deal you never consciously agreed to, but that you've been living by ever since. I will keep you safe, but the price is this. You must never exceed the boundaries I've set for you. You must stay within the cage. Because the moment you step outside it, everything I've built to protect you falls apart. This is the prison. And the worst part, the bars are invisible. You feel them when you're about to do something brave. You feel them when you're about to be vulnerable. You feel them when you're about to claim something you want. That hesitation, that voice that says, "Who do you think you are?" That's not insecurity. That's your ego on high alert. It's not trying to make you fail. It's trying to make sure you stay predictable, manageable, safe within the territory it knows how to defend. The reason your ego sabotages you is because growth requires you to leave this territory. Growth requires you to become someone your ego hasn't yet written the rules for. And to your ego, that's not opportunity, that's a threat. When you get the promotion, your ego panics. This new identity, successful you, respected you, leadership you, this isn't in the handbook. This isn't something it rehearsed. So what does it do? It finds a way to bring you back to familiar ground. It whispers doubts. It manufactures conflicts with your boss. It reminds you of every mistake you've ever made. Not to hurt you, to save you from the terrifying freedom of becoming someone new. This is why so many people sabotage relationships when things get good. This is why people unconsciously create drama right before their goals are about to manifest. This is why people who claim they want success somehow always manage to snatch failure from the jaws of victory. Your ego isn't broken, it's just doing its job, the job it was hired to do. Keep you in a prison you've learned to call home. But here's where it gets darker. Your ego doesn't just protect you from external threats anymore. Over time, it starts protecting you from internal ones. It protects you from your own potential, from your own power, from the part of you that knows you're capable of more. Because if you were to fully access your power, you'd have to admit something your ego cannot accept, that the protective structure it built was never really necessary, that you survived not because of the armor, but despite it. There's a concept from Carl Rogers, the humanistic psychologist, that's absolutely crucial here. He called it incongruence. It's the split between who you really are and who you believe you must be to be acceptable. And your ego doesn't just live in this gap, it's actually the force that creates and maintains it. You know the feeling. You're in a room and you're playing a version of yourself. The version that's together. The version that has it figured out. The version that doesn't feel the things you're actually feeling. You're not lying exactly, but you're not being completely truthful either. You're performing, and the exhaustion you feel isn't just from the day. It's from maintaining the distance between the real you and the version everyone sees. Your ego calls this protection. It calls it professionalism. It calls it maturity. It calls it self-improvement. But what it really is a con. A con you're running on yourself. And the more convincing the con, the more successful your sabotage becomes. Here's why. When you're living in incongruence, when there's a constant gap between who you are and who you're pretending to be, you actually can't move forward. Your ego won't let you. Because forward motion requires wholeness. It requires integrating the parts of yourself you've rejected. It requires owning the messiness, the contradictions, the unflattering truths about your nature. And your ego has spent decades building a wall between those truths and the world. So when success approaches, when the real version of you, the flawed, uncertain, still figuring it out version, is about to be exposed by the demands of a new level, your ego steps in. It sabotages you because it literally cannot tolerate the exposure. It would mean admitting that everything you've constructed is based on a lie. And to your ego, exposure is death. Think about the high achiever who drinks too much right before an important moment. Think about the creative person who suddenly develops anxiety that makes them unable to show their work. Think about the person in the healthy relationship who picks a fight about nothing. These aren't random. They're not weakness. They're your ego's last-ditch effort to preserve the illusion, to pull you back into the familiar prison where no one gets to see the real you anyway. But here's what your ego doesn't understand. The real you isn't the problem. The fake you is the prison. Existence becomes exhausting when you're constantly managing a fiction. Your nervous system is on constant high alert because the fiction could collapse at any moment. Someone could say the wrong thing and expose you. You could make a mistake that reveals who you really are. Someone could see you at a vulnerable moment. And because you've invested everything in maintaining this distance, in keeping people fooled, the anxiety never stops. It just shifts into different forms: perfectionism, people-pleasing, control, avoidance, self-doubt. And your ego calls this protection. But it's actually prison work. You've become the guard and the prisoner, and the only thing the locks keep inside is you. The sabotage that comes from this place is the most insidious because it's invisible even to you. You don't sabotage because you're trying to fail. You sabotage because you're trying to maintain the integrity of the false structure you've built. Every time you break your own promises, every time you abandon your goals, every time you choose the safe mediocrity over the terrifying possibility of actual success, you're actually being loyal. Loyal to your ego's version of you. And your ego rewards this loyalty with the feeling that you're being realistic, grounded, smart. But you're not being smart. You're being trapped by the most convincing lie, that you need to be someone other than who you are in order to be acceptable. Here's something that existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre understood about human nature that most people miss. We are always in a state of what he called bad faith. We're always constructing a version of our reality that makes us feel more in control, more innocent, more justified than we actually are. We're always telling ourselves a story about who we are and what's happening to us. And the story we tell determines what we do next. Your ego is a storyteller, and it's been perfecting its craft for decades. It knows exactly which narrative will justify your sabotage before you even know you're sabotaging yourself. It knows which version of events will make you feel like the victim, like there was nothing you could have done, like life is just happening to you. Let's say you're about to launch something that matters to you. A business, a creative work, a relationship that's finally becoming real. You can feel it. This is the moment. This is what you've been waiting for. And then, almost like magic, something goes wrong. You miss an important call. You forget a critical detail. You suddenly feel overwhelmed and need to step back and think about it more. You find problems that didn't exist yesterday, and from the outside, it looks like bad luck. But on the inside, you know something else. You know you did it. Some part of you sabotaged this, but instead of sitting with that knowledge, your ego immediately reframes it. You're not ready yet. You need more time. You need more preparation. The market isn't right. The timing is off. Your ego builds a narrative that makes the sabotage sound like wisdom, like you dodged a bullet, like you were actually being smart and cautious, not cowardly and self-destructive. This is the most brilliant weapon in your ego's arsenal. It can take your self-destruction and make it sound like self-care. It can take your fear and make it sound like realism. It can take your resignation and make it sound like acceptance. And because the narrative is sophisticated enough, you actually believe it, at least on the surface. But below the surface, some part of you knows the truth. Some part of you remembers that moment of hesitation, that moment where you chose to pull back, to self-sabotage, and that knowing creates a deep shame. Not the shame of failure, but the shame of being a saboteur to your own life. And because shame is unbearable, your ego doubles down on the narrative. It makes the story even more convincing. You don't actually want this. You're not built for this. People like you don't get to have this. You'll just mess it up anyway. And with each repetition, the narrative becomes more real to you than reality itself. So when the next opportunity comes, you don't have to consciously sabotage it. Your ego has already written the ending. You just play your part. This is how the pattern becomes a prison. Not through one big moment of sabotage, but through thousands of small stories, thousands of narratives that slowly convince you that you're fundamentally incapable, that the world is against you, that success is for other people. People who don't have your problems, people who aren't as broken as you are. But the truth is far darker and far more liberating. You're not broken. You're just running an old script, a script that your ego wrote a long time ago to keep you safe. And the prison isn't in your circumstances, it's in the narrative. There's a concept that Erich Fromm explored in his work that most people completely misunderstand: the fear of freedom. Fromm argued that most people don't actually want freedom. They want the illusion of freedom wrapped in the safety of constraints, because freedom is terrifying. Freedom means responsibility. Freedom means there's no one to blame anymore. Freedom means you can't hide behind your past or your circumstances or your limitations. Your ego understands this perfectly. And so it does something brilliant. It uses your past as a weapon against your future. It reminds you constantly of every failure you've ever experienced, every rejection, every time you tried and fell short, not to teach you a lesson, to convince you that the pattern is inevitable, that the past is not just what happened, it's what you are. And if you are failure, then why waste energy on success? This is the ultimate form of sabotage, because it's not even sabotage anymore. It's acceptance of defeat before the battle even starts. It's giving your power away and calling it realism. It's looking at your potential and deciding it's better to be small and safe than to be large and at risk. Think about it. When your ego keeps you small, it doesn't have to defend anything. It doesn't have to perform. It doesn't have to prove itself. Small people don't get criticized for being mediocre because mediocrity is expected of them. Small people don't have to watch people discover they're not who they pretended to be because small people don't pretend to be anything. They just fade into the background and call it humility. And here's the thing. Your ego genuinely believes it's doing you a favor. It's protecting you from the exposure that comes with visibility. It's protecting you from the vulnerability that comes with putting yourself out there. It's protecting you from the shame that would come if you failed at something that actually mattered to you. Because in a strange way, failure at something that doesn't matter much is almost comfortable. It doesn't threaten the narrative. It doesn't expose the incongruence. It just confirms what your ego has always suspected, that you're not built for the big game. You're built for the small leagues, and at least in the small leagues, you know the rules. But the problem is this. The small leagues are suffocating you. The life you've built to be safe is killing you slowly. Every dream you've abandoned, every risk you didn't take, every person you didn't allow to really see you, every version of yourself that could have emerged but didn't because your ego was too busy protecting the version that already exists. And your ego doesn't see this as a tragedy. It sees this as success. I kept you alive. I kept you safe. I kept you from experiencing the devastating rejection that would have destroyed you. In your ego's accounting, the price of your potential is a small price to pay for survival. But you're not surviving anymore. You're just existing. And somewhere deep inside, you know the difference. Now here's where most people get it wrong. They think the solution is to kill the ego, to destroy this protector that's been keeping them small, to wage war against the very thing that once saved their life. But that's not the solution. That's just creating another enemy. Because your ego isn't your enemy. Your ego is a part of you that's frozen in time. It's a part of you that's still responding to threats that may no longer exist. It's a part of you that learned a set of rules a long time ago and has been religiously following them ever since, not realizing that the world has changed, that you've changed, that the rules no longer apply. The real solution isn't destruction, it's integration. It's bringing light to what your ego has been hiding in the dark. It's having a conversation with the protector and saying, I see what you've been trying to do, and I'm grateful, but I don't need this kind of protection anymore. I'm ready to be exposed. I'm ready to risk. I'm ready to find out who I actually am beneath all the protection you've built. And when you say that, something shifts. Not immediately, not with one insight, but gradually. Through the small choices to act despite the voice, to move forward despite the doubt, to claim what you actually want despite the saboteur's whispers. This is what real strength looks like. Not the absence of fear, not the absence of self-doubt, but the capacity to act anyway, to keep moving forward despite the voice that says you can't, to keep building despite the voice that says you'll fail, to keep believing in yourself despite the voice that says you don't deserve it. If something I've said today has touched you, if something has woken up inside you, subscribe to this channel, because the next video is part of this journey. It's important. And I'm going to keep going deeper into these psychological territories that no one else is willing to explore. Real transformation only happens when you're willing to see what everyone else is too afraid to look at. Are you that person? The first thing you need to understand is that your ego operates through distraction. It distracts you from the real work by making you focus on surface-level problems. It gets you obsessed with fixing the symptoms while the disease continues to spread below the surface. You start focusing on time management because your ego whispers that the problem is that you're disorganized. You buy another course because your ego whispers that you just need more knowledge. You change your environment because your ego whispers that the problem is external. But none of these address the real issue, which is that some part of you doesn't want you to succeed. Some part of you is terrified of the exposure that success brings. And until you address that part, no amount of time management or knowledge or environmental change will matter. The second thing you need to understand is that your ego operates through self-justification. Everything it does for what it believes is a good reason. It doesn't sabotage you out of meanness. It sabotages you because it genuinely believes you're not ready. or that you don't deserve it, or that the cost is too high. And because it believes these things, it can't be reasoned with through logic alone. It needs to be understood, deeply understood. This is where most people fail. They try to use willpower against their ego. They try to force themselves through the resistance, and they succeed for a while. They push forward despite the doubt. But because they never actually address the underlying belief, the reason the ego is resisting, the resistance just gets stronger. It mutates. It finds new ways to slow you down, new ways to create obstacles that feel external but are actually internal. The third thing you need to understand is this: your ego isn't trying to hurt you, it's trying to keep you alive. And until you can honor that intention, while simultaneously refusing to be governed by it, you'll be trapped in an endless cycle of self-sabotage, followed by shame, followed by renewed attempts, followed by sabotage again. The cycle only breaks when you stop fighting the protector and start communicating with it. When you're about to do something brave, instead of pushing through the fear, pause. Ask yourself, what is my ego trying to protect me from? Really think about it. What's the worst case scenario that it's terrified of? What's the exposure it's trying to prevent? Because once you name it, once you bring it from the shadow into the light, it loses its power. You might discover that your ego is terrified of success because success means you'll have to maintain an image. It's terrified of visibility because visibility means vulnerability. It's terrified of being really seen because being really seen means that your flaws will be exposed. And once you name that fear, you get to make a new choice. You get to say, yes, visibility might mean vulnerability, but it also means liberation. And I'm willing to pay that price. You get to say, yes, people might see my flaws, but I'm also giving myself permission to be human. And I'm giving them permission to see a real person instead of a performance. This is where the sabotage finally breaks. Not because you've destroyed your ego, but because you've integrated it. You've incorporated the protector into your larger strategy. You've said, I hear you, I understand what you're protecting, and I'm going to move forward anyway. I'm going to move forward with the knowledge that risk exists and I'm taking it consciously. I'm going to move forward with the knowledge that I might fail and I'm choosing courage over safety. There's a fundamental misunderstanding that most people have about identity. They think they are their thoughts. They think they are their fears. They think they are the story that runs continuously in their head. But they're not. They're the awareness behind the story. They're the consciousness that can observe the story without being consumed by it. Your ego wants you to believe that you are the story it tells, that you are the doubts it creates, that you are the narratives of failure and limitation and unworthiness that it constantly broadcasts. But you're not. You're the one listening to the story. And the moment you realize that, the moment you separate yourself from the narrative and simply observe it as a story being told, everything changes. Because once you're observing rather than believing, you're free. You might hear the doubts, but they don't own you. You might feel the fear, but it doesn't dictate your actions. You might hear the whispers of sabotage, but you can choose to move forward anyway. This is the real power. Not the elimination of the ego, not the absence of fear or doubt or resistance, but the capacity to hold all of that while still moving toward what actually matters to you, still claiming what actually belongs to you, still becoming who you actually are capable of being. Your ego will fight this. It will fight it hard because relinquishing control is its ultimate terror. But if you're reading this, then some part of you is already ready. Some part of you is already tired of the sabotage, tired of the self-imposed limitations, tired of playing small. And that part of you, that's not your ego. That's your actual self. That's your real power trying to break through the prison walls that the ego has built. And the question now is, are you going to keep reinforcing those walls, or are you going to finally let yourself out? Here's what I want you to understand in this moment. The recognition you just had, that your ego has been sabotaging you, that the prison is made of narratives rather than stone, that you might actually be free, this recognition is dangerous. And I mean that in the best possible way. Because now that you know this, You can't unknow it. Every time you self-sabotage from this point forward, you won't be able to hide behind accident anymore. You won't be able to blame circumstance. You won't be able to pretend it just happened. You'll know. And that knowledge is going to make you uncomfortable. But discomfort is the price of transformation. It's the cost of finally stepping out of the prison. And it's worth every ounce of resistance you feel. So here's what you're going to do. Starting today, you're going to pay attention, not to your achievements or your failures, but to the moments when you sabotage. The moments when you're about to do something that matters, and suddenly you find a reason not to. The moments when you're about to be vulnerable, and suddenly you pull back. The moments when you're about to claim something that belongs to you, and suddenly the doubts become overwhelming. In those moments, pause and ask yourself, what story is my ego telling me right now? What is it trying to protect me from? And am I going to let that story decide my life, or am I going to move forward anyway? That's the work. That's the real work. Not visualizations or affirmations or any of the motivational band-aids that are floating around. The real work is the daily choice to see the ego's story for what it is, a protection mechanism that was necessary once but isn't anymore, and to move forward anyway. Every time you do this, you're weakening the prison. You're proving to yourself that you're stronger than the narrative, that you can survive exposure, that you can survive risk, that you can survive being fully seen and fully human. And that's when the real sabotage finally stops. Not because your ego disappears, but because you finally stop being governed by it. I want to tell you something. If you've made it this far, if something in you has awakened to what's really been happening beneath the surface of your life, then you're not alone in this. There are thousands of people who are waking up to the same truth. People who are tired of being sabotaged by themselves. People who are ready to finally claim their lives. And I'm creating content specifically for people like you. So if this has resonated, if this has touched something real inside you, subscribe. Don't just watch this one video and disappear. Stay, because the next video is going to go even deeper. I'm going to show you exactly how to break this cycle, how to finally end the self-sabotage and start building the life that actually belongs to you. Are you ready for that? Then let's continue this journey together. You now know the mechanism. You now understand what's been happening. You now see the saboteur for what it really is. Not your enemy, but a frightened protector that's been doing its job a little too well. The question now is not whether you can change. You already know that you can. The question is whether you will. Whether you'll be willing to feel the discomfort of transformation. Whether you'll be willing to face the exposure that comes with growth. Whether you'll be willing to disappoint the version of yourself that your ego has spent decades constructing. Because that's what it's going to feel like. At first, it's going to feel like betrayal, like you're abandoning the safe structure, like you're recklessly throwing yourself into the unknown. And you are. That's exactly what you're doing. But on the other side of that betrayal, there's freedom, real freedom. Not the manufactured freedom of being small and safe, but the authentic freedom that comes from finally aligning your actions with your actual desires. From finally claiming your power. From finally becoming who you're actually capable of becoming. The door is open now. The only question left is whether you'll walk through it.